What was the most humiliating situation you ever faced at work? When I first got the job at Helix Dynamics, I genuinely thought it was the beginning of the life I always dreamed of. I remember holding the offer letter in my hands, sitting on the floor of my crappy apartment, just staring at it because it didn't feel real. All the late nights in college, the unpaid internships, the second jobs just to survive, all of it suddenly made sense. I was finally going to make something of myself. The first few weeks were a blur of excitement. Everyone was so welcoming. My team laughed at my jokes, my manager actually listened to my ideas, and every day I walked into that gleaming office building feeling like maybe, just maybe, I'd found my place. So when Mr. Langston, my manager, pulled me aside and said he wanted me on a special project, something new, something that could fast-track my career, I didn't even think twice. I said yes before he finished asking. That project was called Horizon. It sounded huge, important, like exactly the kind of thing that could change everything for me. They put together a small team, 6 of us in total. Some senior analysts, a project coordinator, a tech lead, and me, the rookie. I was the least experienced person in the room by far, but that just made me more determined to prove I belonged there. Jake was part of the team too. I had seen him around before, everyone knew Jake. He had that kind of charisma you couldn't fake, the type that made you think he must have been born into success. He called me rookie from day one, ruffled my hair like an annoying big brother, and always made sure I sat next to him during meetings. At first, I thought he liked me. I thought it meant I was being accepted. I worked harder on Horizon than I ever had on anything. I stayed late. I triple-checked every report. I volunteered for the assignments no one else wanted. I missed birthdays, family calls, entire weekends because I thought if I just kept proving myself, it would pay off. For a while, it felt like it was. Mr. Langston would nod in meetings when I spoke. Priya, our tech lead, started asking for my input. Once, during an executive review, the VP mentioned my name and said I had potential. I floated home that night, thinking maybe I was finally becoming the person I always wanted to be. I didn't notice the small things at first. How Jake would accidentally leave me off important email threads. How sometimes my sections and reports would have tiny errors I didn't remember making. How a few comments started circulating about me needing to pay more attention to detail. I thought it was in my head. I thought maybe I really was messing up. So I worked even harder. I stayed later. I stopped sleeping. And Jake? Jake just kept smiling, kept slapping me on the back, kept calling me rookie like nothing was wrong. The night I realized something was seriously off, we were prepping for a major presentation. I had spent 2 weeks perfecting my part, double-checking sources, reviewing every line of data, and when Jake offered to help me polish it, I felt grateful. He was senior to me. He knew the politics. I thought he had my back. But when we stepped into that boardroom, when the projector clicked on and my slides popped up, everything was wrong. Data was missing. Figures were misaligned. Worst of all, there were obvious, embarrassing mistakes so bad they made me look incompetent. I stood there frozen, blinking at the screen while the room filled with whispers and sideways glances. Mr. Langston's face hardened into something I'd never seen before. Disgust. Jake just sat there with his arms crossed, smirking like it wasn't even his problem. I stumbled through the presentation somehow, burning with shame the entire time, and afterward, Langston called me into his office and spent 20 minutes lecturing me about how I had embarrassed the team and undermined the company's trust. I tried to explain, but he didn't want to hear it. My voice sounded so small in that room. I left feeling like a fraud, like maybe I didn't deserve any of it after all. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe this was who I really was, a mistake, a disappointment. It didn't even occur to me yet that Jake had set me up. I still trusted too much. Still thought maybe I had just failed. Still thought maybe, if I just worked harder, I could fix it. After that meeting, everything changed, and I could feel it in the way people stopped making eye contact when I passed in the hallways, in the way conversations would die the second I entered a room, like somehow my failure had stained me permanently, and no matter how much I smiled or kept my head down, I couldn't scrub it off. But the worst part was how Jake kept acting like nothing had happened, like we were still buddies, clapping me on the back and saying things like rough day, huh, rookie? With a grin that didn't reach his eyes, and I hated how much I still craved his approval even after everything. I threw myself even harder into my work after that, desperate to fix whatever damage had been done, desperate to prove that I wasn't the screw-up everyone now believed I was. I stayed until the cleaning crews kicked me out, double and triple checking every report, rereading every email 5 times before sending it, terrified of making another mistake. And yet, the mistakes kept happening. Numbers wrong, charts mislabeled, emails mysteriously unsent when they mattered most. At first, I thought maybe I really was losing it, that the pressure and the shame were frying my brain, but then little things started not adding up. Like how sometimes I would save a document perfectly, only to find that the version sent to the client had typos and incorrect figures. Or how files I swore I attached to emails somehow weren't there. I started obsessively documenting everything, printing copies of my work, saving screenshots, forwarding emails to a backup account, because a voice in the back of my head, the voice that I had spent years trying to silence, was whispering that this wasn't just bad luck. Someone was making me look incompetent. The more I paid attention, the clearer the pattern became, and all the roads led back to Jake. He had access to the shared folders. He had the clout to quietly whisper doubts about me to the higher-ups. He was always nearby when the mistakes happened. And yet, even with all that, I kept second-guessing myself, because accusing someone like Jake, the golden boy, the office favorite, without solid proof would be professional suicide. I needed more. I needed undeniable evidence. Meanwhile, the humiliation continued to build. I would walk into meetings only to realize halfway through that key data points were missing from my reports. I would volunteer for projects and get passed over without explanation. The worst was the performance review, where Mr. Langston sat across from me, arms folded, and told me, "I'm disappointed, we expected more from you," and all I could do was sit there, nodding like an idiot, swallowing the burning lump in my throat, because I couldn't even defend myself without sounding like I was making excuses. Afterward, I sat in my car in the freezing underground parking garage for over an hour, staring at the cracked leather of the steering wheel, wondering how it had all gone so wrong so fast, wondering if maybe this was what I deserved for daring to think I could belong somewhere like Helix Dynamics. I kept playing every moment back in my mind, over and over, trying to pinpoint the exact second I lost control, but it wasn't a single moment, it was 1,000 tiny cuts I hadn't even noticed until I was already bleeding out. And Jake? Jake kept smiling, kept slapping my back, kept calling me rookie in that same friendly tone, like he was the only person left who hadn't abandoned me, and I hated him for it almost as much as I hated myself for still craving that false sense of belonging. I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I knew something had to break. I just didn't realize yet how much it was going to cost me before it did. The real breaking point came during a quarterly town hall meeting, the kind where all the departments gather into the massive glass conference room with folding chairs set up in tight rows, the kind where executives give rousing speeches about innovation and collaboration and employees clap just hard enough to seem enthusiastic without being obvious about faking it, and I remember sitting there near the back, trying to keep my head down, trying to pretend I still belonged, when suddenly Mr. Langston's voice cut through the buzz, saying, "Before we move on, I want to address a recent issue regarding the Horizon project," and my stomach dropped through the floor, because somehow I knew, even before he clicked the remote to change the slide, that this was about me. There it was, splashed across the huge projector screen in front of 200 people, a detailed breakdown of an error in one of our major strategic reports, an error so blatant, so catastrophic, it looked almost like sabotage, except the name attached to it wasn't Jake's or Priya's or anyone else's. It was mine. I could feel hundreds of eyes turning toward me, the heat of their judgment like a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders, and I wanted to vanish, to melt into the cheap carpet and disappear, but there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Langston didn't mention me by name, of course, he didn't have to. Everyone knew. Everyone knew that oversight was mine. Everyone knew who had submitted that report. I sat there frozen, staring straight ahead, trying to keep my face neutral, while Langston talked about the importance of attention to detail and personal accountability, every word like a nail being driven deeper into my chest. Jake, sitting 3 rows ahead of me, didn't even bother to hide his smirk. When the meeting ended and people started filing out, I heard the whispers, soft, sharp, cutting. I saw the looks, pity from some, disdain from others. A few people I used to eat lunch with wouldn't even meet my gaze. I stumbled back to my desk like a sleepwalker, my hands trembling so badly I could barely open my laptop. My inbox was already filling with passive-aggressive emails from other departments questioning every detail of my work. Jake passed by my cubicle on his way out, gave me a little wink, and said, "Tough crowd, huh, rookie?" before laughing with someone over his shoulder. I sat there long after everyone else had gone home, staring at my screen without seeing it, feeling like my entire body had been hollowed out, like I was nothing but a shell sitting there waiting to crack under the pressure. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat. Numb. Broken. Humiliated. I think some part of me still hoped, desperately, stupidly, that maybe there was some way out of this, some way to fix it, but deep down, I knew better. I had been marked. In a place like Helix Dynamics, reputation was everything, and mine had been shredded in front of everyone who mattered. Even if I managed to survive this project, even if I managed to scrape together some last scrap of dignity, the stain would never wash off. And the worst part, the part that ate at me more than anything, was knowing that Jake had done it all with a smile, and no one would ever believe me if I tried to explain. To them, I was just another cautionary tale, another rookie who couldn't handle the pressure. Another nobody they would forget by the next quarter. And maybe, just maybe, that's what I deserved for ever thinking I could be one of them. After that meeting, after the humiliation that left me numb for days, something inside me finally broke, not in the way that leaves you curled up crying on the floor, but in the way that sharpens you, hardens you into something you barely recognize in the mirror, and I decided that if I was going down, I was at least going to know the truth, so I started watching Jake, really watching, paying attention to the little things I had ignored before, like how he always volunteered to help with final reviews, how he would offer to submit reports on my behalf when I was swamped, how he had a knack for being just out of sight whenever something went wrong, and the more I watched, the more it all clicked together like a puzzle I hadn't realized I was holding all the pieces to. I dug into the system logs, the file histories, the metadata nobody else ever thought to check, and what I found made my blood run cold. Timestamps showing edits to my files after I had submitted them, IP addresses that traced back to Jake's workstation, subtle, almost invisible alterations that turned perfect reports into disasters waiting to happen. I saved everything. Screenshots. Downloaded copies. Printed logs tucked into the bottom drawer of my desk. I even set up a hidden camera at my cubicle after hours with the help of Lila, one of the only people left who still treated me like a human being instead of a cautionary tale, and within 2 days, I had footage of Jake accessing my computer without permission, slipping in while I was in meetings, making changes with the casual confidence of someone who knew he would never be caught. It should have been enough. It should have been the smoking gun that cleared my name, that brought him down, that gave me some semblance of justice. But Helix Dynamics wasn't built on justice. It was built on connections, and Jake had them. When I brought the evidence to HR, heart hammering, voice shaking with a mix of fear and grim satisfaction, I thought, naively, that they would be horrified, that they would launch an investigation, that someone would finally believe me. Instead, the woman behind the polished glass desk barely glanced at the files before forcing a tight smile and saying, "We appreciate you bringing this to our attention. We'll handle it internally." I knew, even before she slid the folder into a locked drawer without another word, that nothing would happen. Later that night, when I was packing up to leave, one of the senior managers, someone I barely knew, cornered me by the elevators and said, in a voice so low I almost thought I imagined it, "Jake's related to one of the VPs. You didn't hear it from me. Let it go before you make it worse for yourself." I stood there long after he walked away, staring at the closed elevator doors, feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. It wasn't just Jake. It was the whole system. The entire machine was rigged to protect people like him, to sacrifice people like me without a second thought. I drove home that night with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white, every mile a battle not to turn the car into the nearest concrete barrier out of pure, blinding rage. But underneath the rage, there was a colder, quieter resolve settling into my bones. If they were going to destroy me, they were going to have to watch me burn everything on my way out. I wasn't going to let them write my story. Not this time. I started planning my exit, not a resignation, not a quiet slinking away, but something bigger, something that would leave a scar they couldn't ignore. Something that would make them remember me, not as the rookie who failed, but as the man who exposed everything they tried to bury. On my last day at Helix Dynamics, I walked into that towering glass building for the final time with my head held high and a file tucked under my arm that would scorch every smiling liar in that place, because if they thought I was going to disappear quietly, they didn't know me at all, and honestly, maybe I hadn't known myself either until they forced me to see what survival really looked like. I spent that morning tying up loose ends, sending final reports, packing the sad little cardboard box full of my office supplies, my coffee mug, a plant long since wilted, a few pens that didn't even work anymore, and then, right after lunch, when the office buzzed with the lazy, restless energy that always hit on Friday afternoons, I stood up at my desk, took a deep breath, and sent an all-staff email titled The Truth About Horizon, attaching every piece of evidence I had spent the past month collecting, the doctor documents, the surveillance footage, the timestamps, everything, all bundled neatly with a timeline so detailed it would have made a prosecutor proud. And then I walked straight to Mr. Langston's office, dropped a printed copy of the same file onto his desk without saying a word, and turned to leave, but not before catching the way his face drained of color as he flipped through the first few pages. I didn't wait for the fallout. I didn't need to. As I stepped into the elevator and watched the doors close, trapping that hellish place above me, a weight lifted off my chest so fast it made me dizzy. I didn't know what would happen next, if Jake would finally get what he deserved, if anyone would actually care about the truth once the dust settled, but I didn't care anymore, because for the first time in months, I had chosen myself. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding, sleeping until noon, visiting old friends, applying to new jobs without desperation souring every word on my resume. Slowly, the emails trickled in from former coworkers, anonymous notes of thanks, quiet confessions of what they had seen but been too afraid to speak up about, whispers that the VP Jake was connected to had been forced into early retirement, that an internal audit had gutted half the Horizon team, that Jake himself had been escorted out of the building 3 weeks after I left, his security badge revoked, his smug little smile finally wiped off his face. But none of that really mattered to me anymore. By the time I got the news, I was already starting a new job at a smaller company where people looked me in the eye when they talked to me, where mistakes were treated as lessons instead of weapons. I still have scars from Helix Dynamics, scars no promotion or glowing recommendation could erase, but I also have something I didn't realize I had been missing all along, the knowledge that I am not powerless, that I am not who they tried to tell me I was. Sometimes at night, when I can't sleep, I think about that version of me who walked into Helix for the first time, so hopeful, so eager to belong, and I wish I could reach back and tell him that he didn't fail. That being good and working hard aren't always enough in a rigged system. That sometimes surviving means burning everything down and walking away with nothing but your name still intact. And every time I remember the way Jake smirked at me in that boardroom, the way Langston's voice dripped with false disappointment, the way they all thought they had broken me, I smile. Because they were wrong. I'm still here. And they'll never forget the day the rookie they underestimated brought their house of cards crashing down.